जय भीम नमो बुद्धाय। नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। So today we are going to read the subsection 10 of the part 3 of the book 4 of the Buddhist Dhamma. And we are still continuing with what is called the Buddhist way of life. And today we are going to read the subpart titled as On Sorrow and Happiness, On Charity and Kindness. So these are the two subtitles for this particular section, and I'm going to read it through, and then I'm going to gloss over some of the important teachings that have been included here. So the verse number 1, poverty gives rise to sorrow, but removal of poverty does not necessarily give rise to happiness. Not high standard of living, but a high standard of culture is what gives happiness. This is the Buddhist way of life. So this is in a few sentences. Baba Ambedkar has described again what is the element of the Buddhist way of life. Then 5, hunger is the worst of diseases. Health is the greatest of gifts. Contentness the best riches. Trust is the best relationship, and Nibbana the highest happiness. So this is one of the very important verses in the Dhammapada, and Dr. Baba Ambedkar was very fond of this verse number 6 included here. We must learn to live happily indeed, not hating those who hate us. 8, we must learn to live happily indeed, free from ailments among the ailing men. We must learn to live happily indeed, free from greed among the greedy. 10, mankind is ruined by passion, just as fields are damaged by weeds. Therefore, charity done to the passionless brings great rewards. 11, mankind is damaged by vanity, just as fields are damaged by weeds. Therefore, charity done to those who are free from vanity brings great reward. Mankind is ruined by lust, just as fields are damaged by weeds. Therefore, charity done to those who are free from lust brings great reward. Okay. Charity to Dhamma exceeds all gifts. The sweetness of the Dhamma exceeds the Dhamma. The delight in the Dhamma exceeds all delights. 14. Victory breeds hatred, for the conquered is unhappy. He who has given up both victory and defeat, he, the contented, is happy. There is no fire like passion. There is no losing throw like hatred. There is no pain like this body. There is no happiness higher than the rest. Fix not your gaze upon the ill words and ill deeds of others, upon what others do or leave undone. Look rather at what you yourself have done or left undone. It's also very important. Verse number 17. Hard always is life for the modest, the seeker after purity, the detached, the retiring, the cleanly of the life, the discerning. Verse number 18. Is there in the world a man so blameless that he gives no occasion for reproach? As a spirited horse gives no occasion for the stroke of the lash, like a spirited horse that needs not the lash be fiery, be fleet. Do not speak harshly to anybody. Those who are spoken to will answer thee in the same way. Angry speech is painful. Blows for blows will touch thee. Liberty, courtesy, goodwill, and unselfishness, these are to the world what the linchpin to the chariot. This is the Buddhist way of life. So you see this, what we begin as a reading on this Buddhist way of life is all the more in all the subparts is going more deeper and deeper and deeper, and we begin to see the how simple it is to understand what is the Buddhist way of life, but at the same time it is not easy to put in practice the Buddhist way of life. And that's why the clarity that is required to understand what is the Buddhist way of life, so that we can practice it, is very well given clearly by Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And that is the beauty of the Buddha and his Dhamma. So you see, the Buddhism is often talked in terms of the suffering and in terms of all kinds of suffering. And traditionally, we have seen how the nature or the forms of sufferings have been described in the Buddhist literature and the Buddhist texts. Here, it's very profoundly the material, so-called material aspect of suffering has been highlighted by the Buddha, because people tend to think that material well-being doesn't matter, only the psychological well-being matters, and that is true to some extent. But even the poverty or hunger is a sorrow, is a pain, is a suffering, and that fact has not been denied by the Buddha. In fact, the Buddha has said that the people who are in the need of wants and who need to be fed has to be fed, because without that they cannot make a progress. So here I think the important message that has been given in terms of the very verse number 1, as poverty gives rise to sorrow. And when we understand this statement, poverty gives rise to sorrow, we begin to understand the Buddhism in another dimension, in the sense that to remove the so-called material causes and conditions which leads to dukkha is also the aspect of the Buddha Dhamma. Because unless we have this tendency to feel what is called the pangs of hunger, or the pangs of what is called the poverty, then we are going to feel the suffering. And that's why I think we have to understand and we have to explore. This sentence looks like simple sentence, but it has a depth, and that depth has to be explored in terms of the contemporary issues and the contemporary problems, as to what does the Buddha mean by the very statement, poverty gives rise to sorrow. The second sentence itself is deeper, and we have to think about it very carefully and very clearly, in terms of, but removal of poverty does not necessarily give rise to happiness. Of course, poverty gives rise to sorrow. But if we remove poverty, it does not necessarily give rise to happiness, isn't it? Because see, even if you remove the material sufferings in terms of the poverty, in terms of hunger, even then what is called happiness cannot be, cannot arise. And I think that is very profound way by which the Buddhism goes into the culture of mind. So what does the verse number 3 says? Not high standard of living, but a high standard of culture is what gives happiness. And now I think this is what we need to contrast between the high standard of living as opposed to, or in contrast with, the standard of culture. So what is the high standard of culture? And I think this statement looks very simple at the face of it, but the standard of culture is a very deep concept. How do you understand the standard of culture? We can understand that standard of living in terms of housing, in terms of wealth, in terms of even physical well-being, in terms of many factors. We can talk about the so-called standard of living or standard of life or whatever. But how do we understand the high standard of culture? And if we look at Buddhism is something that leads to the high standard of culture, that sophistication of culture, that sublimity of the culture, that very higher and higher development of the culture. And in fact, we have seen that Baba Ambedkar's one of the very famous quotes is that the ultimate aim of the human existence is the cultivation of mind. So you see, the cultivation of mind and the cultivation of culture in terms of Buddhism are the same sort of things that we can think about. And therefore, these 3 sentences looks very simple, but if we examine them deeply, we begin to see how important they are and how interlinked they are to each other. So therefore, I'm going to read them, 3 of them together again, so that we capture the basic and very micro nuances of it. So 1, it's like an axiom: poverty gives rise to sorrow. There is no denial of this fact that the poverty does not give rise to sorrow. But if we remove poverty, does not necessarily give rise to happiness. Not high standard of living, but a high standard of culture is what gives happiness. So there is a direct correlationship between the culture of mind and happiness. So if we want to experience happiness, the true bliss, then we have to cultivate our minds. We need that culture which helps to cultivate the human minds. And therefore, I think this is very important. And the fourth verse emphatically says that this is the Buddhist way of life, isn't it? So what is the Buddhist way of life? We have seen many dimensions of the Buddhist way of life. And this is in the subpart 10, Baba Ambedkar has very beautifully explained what is the Buddhist way of life is to cultivate the high standard of culture. That is the Buddhist way of life, and the culture encompasses many things in terms of the language, in terms of the arts, in terms of anything that makes our minds very cultured and makes our mind very beautiful. And therefore, I think that's sort of a culture that Baba Ambedkar is talking about when he's talking about the high standard of culture. The verse number 5, I would say, is an extension of the verse number 1, which is very graphically stated here. Hunger is the worst of diseases. So, we of course know that there are many kinds of diseases, but as the Buddha teaches, hunger is a disease. So if we are hungry, if we feel hunger, then, it is like we are diseased, our minds are diseased. And therefore, this verse number 5 is altogether very important. It's amplification of the verse number 1. If we see it as, is structured by Baba Ambedkar here, hunger is the worst kind of diseases. And the verse number 6 is a very famous gatha from the Dhamma, and Baba Ambedkar was so fond of this gatha that he has written it in Devanagari. And we can still see that in one of the letters that Baba Ambedkar sent, and it's put up in Rajagriha. And I'm going to read it in English, and then I'm going to try to put it in Pali. So health is the greatest of gifts, arogya paramalabha. Contentness, the best riches, santoshang paramadhanang. Trust is the best of relationship. Nyati is Viswasang Paramanyati. Viswasang is Paramanyati. And Nibbana Paramasukham. Nibbanang Paramasukham. So this is one of the very favorite gathas of Baba Ambedkar in Dhammapada. And I think this captures in a way the entire teachings of the Buddha in terms of how we should look after our health, how we should feel contentment, how we should develop the trust between our relationships, and the highest happiness that one should seek. There is no other happiness higher than the happiness of the Nibbana. And I think that is this verse number 6 in a way captures the sense of the of the above verses and the heart of the Buddha's teaching. So I'm going to read the verse number 6 again. Health is the greatest of gifts. Contentedness, the best riches. Trust is the best of relationships. Nibbana, the highest happiness. 7. We must learn to live happily indeed, not hating those who hate us. So you see, to learn to live happily is a learning, isn't it? It's not that the happiness is just going to be there. We have to learn to be happy. That means we have to train our minds to be happy. That means we have to cultivate our minds to experience the sublime bliss, the bliss of Nibbana. So the verse number 7 is very clear. We must learn to live happily indeed, not hating those who hate us. You see the pain or the suffering that results when people are in conflict, isn't it? There are a lot of ways by which the conflict is now being talked about in terms of the management of conflicts, in terms of various methods by which the conflicts can be tackled. But here, I think any of us who have experienced, and most of us have experienced this, that whenever there is when there is this cycle of hatred going on between the individuals or the communities, that doesn't lead to happiness. It leads to sorrow, it leads to suffering, it leads to all sort of problems in the world, in the families, in the societies, and in all the spheres of life. So you see this, if we want to learn happily, we have to cultivate what is called a profound love. And if we read these two sentences together, we must learn to live happily indeed, not hating those who hate us, isn't it? So there are in the world people hate us, as we have seen that there are these 8 worldly winds, they blow all the time. Sometimes people hate us, sometimes people love us, sometimes we gain, we lose, sometimes we are praised, sometimes we are contempted, and so on and so forth. And if we sway by these worldly winds, we cannot experience the happiness. And therefore, the verse number 7 is, I think, very, very clearly, putting the point across in terms of we must learn to live happily indeed, not hating those who hate us. The verse number 8, we must learn to live happily indeed, free from ailments among the ailing men. We must learn to live happily indeed, free from greed among the greedy. So hate, the people who have diseased minds, and the people who are greedy, if we live among them, in a way that is that is of love, that is of well-being, and that is of being charity, then we can live happily. Verse number 10 further expounds the previous 3 verses. Mankind is ruined by passion, just as fields are damaged by weeds. Very clear. Therefore, charity done to the passionless brings great rewards. So if we are doing charity to those who are passionless, then it will bring great rewards. Here, the charity towards the passionless is of course the Buddhist Sangha, or those people who are on the higher path. If we do charity to them, it brings great rewards to the world itself. 11, mankind is damaged by vanity, just as fields are damaged by weeds. Therefore, charity done to those who are free from vanity brings great rewards. Very clear. The verse number 12, mankind is ruined by lust, just as fields are damaged by weeds. Therefore, charity done to those who are free from just lust. Actually, the word is lust. Here is a misspelling. Just from lust brings great reward. Verse number 13, charity to Dhamma exceeds all. Sabba danang Dhamma danang jinati. Isn't it? So actually, it's charity to Dhamma and the charity of Dhamma. So if we teach the Dhamma, we ultimately teach people the ultimate method to free themselves, to culture their minds. And therefore, in Buddhism, it's said that of all the charity, of all the donation in the world, of all the givings in the world, the gift of the Dhamma exceeds all the gifts. The sweetness of the Dhamma exceeds the Dhamma. The Dhamma is so sweet that when we begin to experience the fruits of our practice, the fruits of our understanding, the fruits of our wisdom, we begin to know that it is the sweetest of all the things in the world. The delight in the Dhamma exceeds all the delight, and the kind of delight that we experience when we practice the sublime Dhamma of the Buddha, it exceeds all the delights. Verse number 14 is, of course, taken from the Dhammapada. Victory breeds hatred, for the conquered is unhappy. He who has given up both victory and defeat, he, the contented, is happy, isn't it? So, we always, when we live in the world, we are thinking in terms of victory or defeat. Can we think about a life which is beyond victory and defeat? The life which is contented. We are not seeking victory, or we are not seeking anybody's defeat. We are just trying to live a contented life. Can we imagine that kind of a way of life where we are not always competitive with other people, where we are not trying to put other people down, where we are not trying to pull other people down? We are not scoring the points in the words. In other words, we are not trying to score the points over other human beings. Can we think of that life? Can we think of that mind which is not competitive? Can we think of that mind which is not seeking, this victory or defeat? Isn't it? Can we think about that contented mind, that mind which never competes with others, that never competes for any rank, the mind that never competes to gain the superiority over other people? That's a very profound teaching of the Buddha, because we are all the time competing with other human beings, comparing with other human beings, trying to score points over other human beings. There's always going on. But the Buddha is asking us whether we can think about a life, a way of life which is beyond this victory and defeat, isn't it? So verse number 14, I'm going to reread it. Victory breeds hatred, for the conquered is unhappy. He who has given up both victory and defeat, he, the contented, is happy. And this is very far. We have seen this verse number 15 in different forms, in different angles. But here also Baba Ambedkar has emphasized it. There is no fire like passion. We have seen that the passion is like a fire, it burns everything. There is no fire like passion. There is no losing throw like hatred. Hatred is always going to defeat us. Whenever we feel hate, we are already defeated. Whenever we feel competitiveness, whenever we feel this kind of jealousy or hatred, we are already defeated, isn't it? It's like there is no losing throw like hatred. There is no pain like this body. This is very profound, isn't it? If we understand the nature of the body, in our sati pathan, when we are asked to examine our body the way it is, to become mindful of our body the way it is, from our head to toe, all our internal organs, all things that goes on in the body. This sentence is like a sentence that has power to make us realize the very nature of the body. What is the nature of the body? The nature of the body is that it gives rise to a lot of pain. Imagine a situation when we have certain kind of a disease, when we have been suffering by certain kind of physical issues or problems. There is so much pain, isn't it? But that pain is an optional. If we choose not to own the body in terms of psychological ownership, then that pain is just the pain. It doesn't cause us suffering. It doesn't cause us dukkha, because we realize that is the nature of the body. So you see, this is not a sentence thrown just like at random. This is a sentence that has a profound meaning. There is no pain like this body. There is no happiness higher than the rest. Now see, when we are talking about Nibbana, we can talk about Nibbana in many different terms. But talking about Nibbana in terms of rest, in terms of the mind that is tranquil, in terms of the mind that is at ease, in terms of the mind that is stabilized completely, in terms of the mind which is completely calm, isn't it? So the calmness of the mind is directly connected to happiness, isn't it? The agitated mind can never be happy. Only the calm and the tranquil and very, the mind that is unshakable is the mind that tends to happiness. And this is what the Buddha has taught us in this beautiful verse. There is no happiness higher than the rest, isn't it? Can we find that profound rest within ourselves? Can we rest our mind so deeply that we experience that happiness of Nibbana? So let me read this beautiful verse number 15 again. There is no fire like passion. There is no losing throw like hatred. Those who are hateful are always going to lose. Hate is always going to lead to suffering, more suffering. There is no pain like this body. And this body, of course, the nature of the body is to cause the pain. There is no happiness higher than the rest. The verse number 16, fix not your gaze upon the ill words and ill deeds of others. We are always trying to fix our gaze on what the Buddha taught, very clearly here, always on the ill words of the others and the ill deeds of others. Always, always, always we are picking the faults of others. All the time we are trying to pinpoint to the faults of others. Always, always, always. Our focus is always on the ill deeds and the ill words of others. Upon what others do or leave undone. The Buddha says, look rather at what by yourself have done or left undone. Isn't it? So the gaze has to be turned inwards, instead of picking the points, picking the faults of others, instead of looking at what other people are doing and not doing. We should be looking at ourselves as to what we are doing and not doing, instead of putting our gaze out there. And I think this is very, very important. Always we try to cultivate ourselves. We always try to cultivate our minds, develop our minds. And when we are seeking to develop our minds, ultimately we are seeking to benefit other human beings. Because developing our individual mind is not just about our mind, because our mind is relational with other human beings. We have to cultivate the kindness, we have to cultivate the metta, we have to cultivate the wisdom, and therefore the cultivation of our minds are always to do with the welfare of others. And therefore, if we turn the gaze within, isn't it, instead of just picking the faults of others, or put our gaze upon the ill words and ill deeds of others, Rather than that, we have to look at ourselves as to what we are doing and what we are not doing. Hard always is life for the modest, isn't it? So the person who is following the middle path, don't think that their lives are easy. Their lives are difficult. It's a hard life. The seeker after purity, the detached, the retiring, the cleanly of life, the discerning, isn't it? So if you are seeker of purity, if you want to be detached, if you want to retire from this whole, this samsara, if you want to have a clean life, if you want to have that discerning mind, the mind that discerns, the mind of prajna, it's not easy. It's not always easy. It's hard, isn't it? That's why Baba Ambedkar said emphatically that Buddhism is a hard path. It's not an easy path. One has to be like a warrior. If we have to walk on this path of the Buddha, it's not an easy path. It's a difficult path. It's a hard path. Verse number 18 goes like this. Is there in the world a man so blameless that he gives no occasion for reproach? There is no blameless person in the world. We have all committed certain wrong things in the life, all of us. And there is no man in the world so blameless that he gives no occasion for reproach, as a spirited horse gives no occasion for the stroke of the lash. We have seen this simile before, the stroke of a lash, as to how the horses are trained. In the previous parts of the Buddha and Dhamma, we have seen that some horses needs to be hit hard to train them. Some horses needs to be just touched by the lash. And some of the horses, if they see just the shadow of the whip or the lash, they are trained, isn't it? And as an example, we have seen that we hear that the news of somebody dying, somebody died, somebody suffering, and we don't think that we are going to we are of the same nature. We are going to die one day. We are going to suffer one day. We will be having some diseases, isn't it? So we don't put ourselves to training like that horse, isn't it? So the Buddha says that we have to be very alert about this. Whenever we hear about this, whenever we see about suffering in the world, we should be on our guards. We should not think that this will not happen to me. This might happen to us, and therefore we should at once dedicate ourselves to this training that the Buddha has taught. So verse number 18 is very clear. Is there in the world a man so blameless that he gives no occasion for reproach, as a spirited horse gives no occasion for the stroke of the lash? Like a spirited horse that needs not the lash be fiery, be fleet, isn't it? So we don't need that hitting hard, the hard hitting lash to make us understand the nature of the world or the nature of our bodies. Verse number 19. Do not speak harshly to anybody. Those who are spoken to will answer thee in the same way. If we are harsh towards other human beings, they will be in turns harsher to us, isn't it? That's very simple. And angry speech is painful. If somebody is talking to us angrily, we don't feel happy. We feel painful. If somebody is speaking down to us, if somebody is trying to throw angry words at us, we do suffer. We feel painful. Blow for blow will touch thee, isn't it? Very beautiful. If we are indulged in the physical fight, it's going to touch us also. We will be hit, isn't it? So you see, this is like very practical way by which this particular section is conceived. Do not speak harshly to anybody. Those who are spoken to will answer thee in the same way. Angry speech is painful. Blow for blow will touch thee. And what is the verse number 20? It's a very, very important that we look at this word, verse number 20. Liberty. In other words, freedom or mukti, courtesy, goodwill, and unselfishness. These are to the world what the linchpin to the chariot, isn't it? If the world has to progress, if the world has to move in a positive direction, what is important is liberty. What is important is courtesy. What is important is goodwill and unselfishness. These are all things that are needed for the world to advance further. And therefore, the Buddha has likened it with the linchpin of the chariot, there is the linchpin by around which the wheel of the chariot moves. Without the linchpin, the wheel cannot move. And therefore, what liberty, courtesy, goodwill, and unselfishness, they are so important for the world that they are very important for the world to move in the forward direction. This is the Buddhist way of life. Verse number 21. So you see this the subpart, like all other 9 previous parts we have seen, is not just a theory. It's very important for us to put in practice. This is how we bring these all teachings of the Buddha in our day-to-day life, in our lives. This is the Buddhist way of life. And I think all of us need to have this reflection on what constitute the way of life of a Buddhist, how we as a Buddhist should live our lives. And as we live, as we read, further and further, we begin to have this very clear clarity on what constitute the Buddhist way of life. And before I open up our class for any reflection or any discussion, I would like to reread the subsection 10 so that everything will tie together. Okay. The subpart 10 on sorrow and happiness, on charity and kindness. Poverty gives rise to sorrow, but removal of poverty does not necessarily give rise to happiness. Not high standard of living, but a high standard of culture is what gives happiness. This is the Buddhist way of life. Hunger is the worst of diseases. Health is the greatest of gifts. Contentedness, the best riches. Trust is the best of relationships. Nibbana is the highest happiness. We must learn to live happily indeed, not hating those who hate us. We must learn to live happily indeed, free from ailments among the ailing men. We must learn to live happily indeed, free from greed among the greedy. Mankind is ruined by passion, just as feet are damaged by wits. Therefore, charity done to the passionless brings great reward. Mankind is damaged by vanity, just as fields are damaged by wits. Therefore, charity done to those who are free from vanity brings great rewards. Mankind is ruined by lust, just as fields are damaged by wits. Therefore, charity done to those who are free from lust brings great reward. Charity to Dhamma exceeds all gifts. The sweetness of the Dhamma exceeds the Dhamma. The delight in the Dhamma exceeds all delights. Victory breeds hatred, for the conqueror is unhappy. He who has given up both victory and defeat, he, the contented, is happy. There is no fire like passion. There is no losing throw like hatred. There is no pain like this body. There is no happiness higher than the rest. Fix not your gaze upon the ill words and ill deeds of others, upon what others do or leave undone. Look rather at what by yourselves have done or left undone. Hoard always is a life for the modest, the seeker after purity, the detached, the retiring, the cleanly of life, the discerning. Is there in the world a man so blameless that he gives no occasion for reproach, as a spirited horse gives no occasion for the stroke of the lash? Like a spirited horse that needs not the lash be fiery, be fleet. Do not speak harshly to anybody. Those who are spoken to will answer thee in the same way. Angry speech is painful. Blows for blows will touch thee. Liberty, courtesy, goodwill, and unselfishness. These are to the world what the linchpin to the chariot. This is the Buddhist way of life. So we conclude here the subsection 10 of the part 3, the Buddhist way of life of the book 4 of the Buddha and Dhamma, and we will open up the class for any reflection, anything that anybody would like to share.
Verse number 2.
Verse number 2. Yes, ma'am.
Removal of poverty doesn't necessarily give rise to happiness.
Yes.
Rich people, poor man feels that rich people must be very happy and enjoying life, but the mind of the rich man is never happy. He is involved in his own suffering. Everyone has suffering as they decide on their own. So we should concentrate on our deeds. On this is the first two, I think.
Good. Good, true. And that has been made clear in the verse number 3, Al-Katai. Not high standard of living, but a high standard of culture. So we all need to know what is the high standard of culture. How do we live the high standard of culture instead of just improving our living standard? The Buddha is not saying that we should not improve our living standard. We should, because if we are poor, if we are hungry, if we lack material, comfort, basic material comfort, we are going to suffer, isn't it? So all that is there, but that is not what is going to make us happy, isn't it? So, that is a kind of a reflection for all of us as to what constitutes the higher standard of culture. So higher standard of culture is, of course, Buddhism. The Buddhism gives rise to what is called the higher standard of culture. That is what has happened in the human history. Wherever Buddhism has gone, it has created the higher and higher standards of culture. So good.
Practice of Buddhist virtues.
Yes.
Values.
Yes. Values. And the teachings of the Buddha, how we can cultivate them, how we can teach them, how we can spread them, isn't it? Okay, anybody else?
Sir, I had one question.
Please.
So, we have to continuously cultivate our mind.
Yes.
So I was just thinking, what is the nature of our mind?
What is your question, Samiksha? Can you clarify, clear?
Like you said, sir, that the nature of our body is pain.
Yes.
So what is the nature of our mind?
Yes. See, our nature of our mind is impermanence. The characteristic of mind is that the mind is never at rest. And if we can find the means by which we can rest our minds, we can calm our minds, because the nature of the mind is to be agitated. The nature of the mind is to run after the objects, to run after what is called in Buddhist parlance, the alamban, the objects of mind. And that is where our minds are always running. They are never still, they are never quiet, they are never at ease or at rest. That is the nature of our mind. So, Buddhism or the Buddha teaches us to calm our minds, to train our minds to become what is in the Buddhist meditation terms called samatha, to achieve that tranquility of the mind. And when we achieve that tranquility of the mind, we experience the bliss, we experience the happiness. So the nature of mind is being agitated, is being restless, is being impermanent, is being, not stationary, not calm, not tranquil. And that's why the Buddha teaches us to find the ways of training by which we can train our minds to be calm. So, the practices like Anapanasati, where we try to rest our minds onto the basic rhythm of breathing, isn't it? It has such a power to bring happiness if we can calm our minds. Okay, Samiksha?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anyone?
So in this continuation, can we say that our mind, person's mind is more or less has occupied by the space, by the passion, vanity, and lust? Means they have different proportion altogether in one's mind, and that's why I think in 10th, 11th, and 12th verses, almost each and every word is same. These lines have been, and these verses have been put all together in 3 verses. Otherwise it could be said in the single line: mankind is ruined by passion, comma, vanity, comma, lust.
Yes, because you see these 3 poisons are always talked about by the Buddha: lust, passion, and vanity. This is always the more the more elaborate we are in terms of understanding the very different poisons of mind. And if we look at the literature that has been handed down to us, where the Buddhists have studied the human mind at such a level, microscopic level, in terms of the mental states, we can see that we can club it into one as well, saying that mankind is damaged by ignorance, because not knowing is the greatest of the disease. And because of not knowing, we lust for something which is not going to give us happiness. We hate people. We are full of vanity. So you see, that is right. We can club it together as well, but it better be emphasized separately, because the human mind is not as not a simple system to understand. It's a very complex system to understand. And that the way the mind functions, the way the mind gives rise to different states, are categorically listed by the Buddhist, even including the Buddha. And I think this you are right. We can have three separate verses. We can include in one verses, but better we have three separate verses, because as you said, that our minds are dominated by this poisons in a different proportionate ways. Sometimes our minds are full of lusts, and the lust is connected with hatred. If we don't fulfill our lust, we might become hateful. The hateful mind is also having this element of lust. So all these three poisons are connected with each other, isn't it? The lust, vanity, the greed, the passion, everything is connected with each other.
Yeah, true. And that's why means we need to know about the mind and thought.
Yes, we have to know when we see,
Through Abhidhamma.
yes.
Abhidhamma has
Through the mindfulness of mind also, we can know whether our minds are now lusty, whether our minds are hateful, whether our minds are ignorant, whether our minds are contracted, whether our minds are expanding, whether our minds are moving towards nibbana, whether our minds are gravitating towards the sansara. We can know this all characteristics of mind by practicing the satipatthana, establishing the awareness of the mind.
yes, we have to draw the indicators, means that we are moving in the right directions, means that those indicators, the daily progressive and measurable indicators that we need to explore more and more.
You can use that language of SMART, or specific, measurable, whatever indicates. You can use in various ways. And if you read the Dhamma literature, you can begin to see this very many indicators, very concrete ones.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Good question.
Practice of Eightfold Path
Yes.
helps in removing the enemies, 5 enemies,
Yes.
and passions.
True. That is the basic. That is the essence.
Yeah. Verse number 14.
14, yes.
Pity breeds breeds hatred, for the conquered is unhappy. He who has given up both victory and defeat is happy. This verse teaches equanimity, upekha. It is a state of mind where there is neither like or dislike. If you are gained some victory, then you should not be overwhelmed because of the victory. You should remain detached. That is upekha, practice of upekha itself. This verse teaches to remain unmoved by the result, but continue the efforts, endeavor, whatever you are doing.
True. Perfect. Very well said. Welcome, madam.
Jai Bhim, sir.
Jai Bhim, Shashank.
Yes, sir. So I would like to talk about the verse number 13. It's so beautiful, and it always gives the wonderful feeling that this Dhamma is so beautiful. The charity of Dhamma exceeds all gifts. The sweetness of the Dhamma exceeds the Dhamma. So I can say that even we are like, living in 21st century, and we are like, whenever we recite any gathas or whenever we do discuss of Dhamma, we feel the sweetness of the Dhamma. We feel the delight in the Dhamma. The way we are talking right now about on sorrow and happiness, on charity and kindness, and also beautiful gatha you just said that health is the greatest of gifts, content is the best riches. Whenever we recite those and whenever we discuss to at least for 10 or 15 minutes every day, or maybe with your friends or with your family, it really gives a wonderful sweetness. And that sweetness, like, is so beautiful that it gives inner happiness. And that delight is like cannot be compared with any other delights. Even if you like, trying to get some material things in our life, we always engage in the material things, try to gain some high standard of living. But then when we like, get that discussion going, or when we practice the Dhamma with our friends, with our family, or with our society, that delight is so beautiful. And even after 2500 years, that delight is so sweet to live that delight. So that's how the Dhamma is like exceeds all the delights.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good reflection. Good. All right. Anyone has anything to say before we conclude our class today? Rahul, Arvind sir, Sukhdev sir, Vidyanand.
Because my material delights are pleasures are temporary, impermanent. So they remain temporary. And this Dhamma, pleasure of Dhamma is, happiness of Dhamma is permanent. So we feel happy, delightful.
Okay, then we conclude our class here today, and see you in the next class. This is going to be the forthcoming class. Only 3 verses, but they are going to consume all of our class. So look forward to studying the next section 11. And till then, bye, and see you next class.
Only 3 verses are there.
But they are very profound. They are going to take our entire class. Okay. So, thank you so much, and see you in the next class.
Thank you. Jai Bhim.